You know, Oregon State and Washington State rebuilt an entire conference. Don't you think that would add a lot of value to the Big 12? Why did that conversation stop? It's a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Christian Rao crossover. Christian is the West Coast guy. We're also going to talk a lot of Kansas State. This is Locked On Big 12.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Thursday, everybody. Welcome to a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Kansas State crossover. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. Christian Rao from Kansas State's #1 daily podcast, Locked On Kansas State. Thank you for making our shows your first listen every single day. We will start in the expansion and realignment realm. I mean, look, here's first and foremost, wild night of Big 12 basketball last night. I watched it. I saw it. I fell asleep at 11 o'clock Eastern time, and there was still a whole half of basketball to go. That's what happened in hoops yesterday. As of today, though, I got to thinking, Christian, as a West Coast guy, you know, you and I had to talk about Oregon State, Washington State, what they could bring to the Big 12, what they would do in the Big 12, and how they got left out in the last round of realignment, and why they got left out of a conference altogether for the Pac-12. So I want to revisit that then. Colin Klein got a lot stacked against him, man. A lot stacked against him. Can he win in year number 1? And finally, Jerome Tang fired? Or is there not enough money to go around to do so? If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our jobs. Christian, Oregon State and Washington State. This is the equivalent of the Big 12 dissipates and Kansas State or Iowa State or at the time TCU gets left off the board and just doesn't have a conference home and, oh no, we're in the Mountain West. But these two schools rebuilt the Pac-12. They stayed the course and rebuilt a conference. To me, I don't want Memphis. I don't want UAB. I don't want Temple. I don't really want UConn. I want the schools that had the fortitude, the money, the cash, the wherewithal to rebuild a league. Washington State and Oregon State have that. I think as the Big 12 looks for new business ventures, those two schools are a place to start.
Yes, they definitely should be the place to start. Now, will it be tough to get them there because now they maybe feel responsible for rebuilding the new Pac-12? That's an entirely different conversation. But yeah, those two programs completely fit inside of the new Big 12. And honestly, you're starting to see that with the football season right now, having agreements, having partnerships with the Big 12, which I think is a very smart decision for these programs to kind of ride the coattails of the Big 12. Oregon State playing Houston, Washington State playing Kansas State this year in home and home games. So that type of program and that type of process is in the right direction. And it kind of gives you that feel. You get it in non-conference, but you can kind of get the idea of, hey, these would be really good fits for the Big 12 in future seasons.
We talk about the map, and the Big Ten wanted this. They wanted to go across the country and have games from the West Coast to the East Coast. Now they have that, and you could argue that it hasn't been a smooth marriage for them because USC versus Rutgers is still weird. It makes more sense to me to have Oregon State playing Texas Tech or Washington State playing Texas Tech or Houston. We've seen that as non-conference matchups. And look, man, the reason it makes sense is there's something gritty about it. There is something blue collar. There's something different about the way those two schools operate. And I got to learn those fan bases over the last 2 or 3 years really well in speaking on their behalf for, like, we shut down Locked On Pac-12. The Big 12, you know, the Locked On Network lost a whole conference show, and Oregon State, Washington State fans are going, hey, whoa, who's going to talk about us every day now? And no one can. I like being a mouthpiece for that. Christian, am I off base here? Am I off base that grit and toughness kind of makes you fit in what the Big 12 is trying to mold?
Oh, 100%. And when you want to talk location, it would feel natural to bring them in because you already have the Utahs and the BYUs. You've already brought over Arizona State and Colorado from the old Pac-12. So naturally, it would make a lot more sense compared to what the Big Ten did. And that's why it feels so awkward to have a Rutgers versus an Oregon game in swimming or something like that, let alone just college football. So yeah, I'm all about that. But yeah, you're talking about grit. I mean, the people of Pullman, the Palouse, I mean, those guys, the men and women, they're incredible. The fan base is incredible. And although Oregon State had to deal with a very unfortunate coaching change that just happened, the fan base still stuck around. the fan base did a really good job at sticking through a really tough situation that just happened over this past year with Trent Bray. They have a lot of things looking forward to that program, a lot of good athletic director changes and good financing things happening in Washington State as well. The right direction for both these programs are they're heading in the right direction, I should say. What makes you wonder, though, is like, can they be enough to bring the Pac-12 back to relevance? Are we going to ever say Power 5 again? I doubt it. So maybe that makes you think that they're ready to shift on and get back to that power status.
And that's why I think they ultimately will. They'll have to. They're rebuilding the Pac-12 not as a long-term play here, but to rebuild it to give themselves enough leverage to find their way into a power conference, to find their way into relevance again in college football. And football is the straw that stirs the drink. That's what you want to be good in. That is where the revenue comes from for the Pac-12, for Washington State, for Oregon State. They need a league like the Big 12, a media deal like what the Big 12 has to sustain that. And there are people out there saying, well, man, I saw it. I watched it last year. Texas Tech beat the hell out of them. Yeah, but you have to understand their resources were cut into a third when the Pac-12 said goodbye, and they got a pretty good first check, lump sum. But then after that, the coaching staff, their players said, "Oh, I'm not in a power conference. I'm gone. I'm bolting." Christian, talk about the uphill battle these two schools have faced since the day they found out they don't have a conference.
Yeah, it's been unreal. I mean, let's just use Washington State as a perfect example. We're seeing that happen in real time with the Big 12 as well. Jimmy Rogers last year was the head coach for Washington State. He had to bring 75 new players with him to Washington State last year just because that team was completely just devoured because they no longer felt like a power school. The Pac-12 didn't have that same type of resume as it once did. Jimmy Rogers comes in and gets 75 newcomers and gets them to a bowl game. Now we're going to see if Jimmy Rogers can do the same thing at Iowa State. But just that alone shows how much they had to overcome. Oregon State had to deal with some coaching issues as well. They lost a lot of players. Now they're finally bringing in the right coaching staff and enough NIL to help their coaching. I believe they're giving about $4 to $5 million for the Oregon State coaching staff to help out with their brand new return. Either way, it's certainly tough. And if they could get back to where they were, where the Pac-12 once was, or if they could find themselves in the Big 12, maybe in 2030 when that changes, maybe even beforehand, if they can find a way to do that, then man, I think that those are programs that would sit in the Big 12 and be great programs, fantastic programs, ones that we're starting to see with how great Houston's starting to turn around, how Utah's turned around. Those would be programs I think would fill right into that spot.
Contributors, no doubt. Coming up, somebody who needs contributors on the field, and a lot of them, is Colin Klein, new head coach at Kansas State. How do you grade what he did in the portal and whether or not K-State will win right away in 2026? Christian Rao has the answer. This is a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Kansas State crossover.
I'm Clea Butler, host of Locked On Women's Basketball, and this is Mazda's Women's Basketball Snapshot, celebrating the work no highlight reel can ever capture. Number 1 ranked UConn dominated Tennessee 96-66, turning a halftime tie into a historic win and avenging last season's loss by delivering the largest margin in the rivalry's history. AZ Fudd had 27 points and Sarah Strong added 26 as the Huskies remain perfect on the season, reminding everyone why they are the reigning national champions. In the Big Ten, number 2 UCLA rolled past number 8 Iowa 88-65, powered by 22 points from Angela Dukelich and a huge advantage in the paint, staking their claim as a national threat. These moments are earned off the clock, those long before the lights ever come on. The sweat, the fakes, the doubt, the scrapes, and coming back for more every time. Mazda puts that same drive into every detail. Wins define the moment, putting in the work, that defines you. There's more to a Mazda because there's more to you.
Welcome back to a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Kansas State crossover. We won't. Yeah, we do. Every now and then Arkansas just comes right back up. That Arkansas just finds its way through there. We want to tell you some good news about the Locked On Podcast Network, baby. The Everydayer Club is here. You can go to lockedonbig12.supercast.com, lockedonkansastate.supercast.com, and get ad-free. Look, you're an everydayer. You're like, oh, man, the ads. So many ads. I see those comments. Ad-free Locked On Big 12 right for you with the Everydayer Club, lockedonbig12.supercast.com or lockedonkansastate.supercast.com. All right, Christian, let's be real, man.
Yeah.
Look, Kansas State lost to Army last year. lost its head coach, like tumultuous season into tumultuous offseason, but the quarterback stayed. The nucleus might still be Colin Klein return. Like, what if there is good news behind the curtain for K-State?
Yeah, is it wrong to be optimistic? Because it certainly feels like it's the right thing to do right now. The prodigal son, Colin Klein, comes back to Kansas State. Are you kidding me? Like, this just feels right. Things just feel right. And then when you look at the pieces they were added in the transfer portal, maybe I'm looking at it with blind eyes. Maybe I am. Maybe I have the blinders on, Drake, but I feel like this is the best transfer portal that Kansas State has had since the portal has really been the thing it is since 2019. I feel that way. It feels like they added the right fit. They didn't add pieces that are just going to be like one-time stands. They are developmental pieces as well. And maybe that doesn't mean they go back to Arlington in 2026. Maybe that's not the expectation. But with the return of Avery Johnson in 2026, certainly raises the floor back up from what was 6-6 last year. And with Colin Klein, the offensive mastermind, I think he nailed the defensive hires, which were his most important pieces as well. I think if you can add that nucleus and that core and bring what he's trying to bring, the good old school that he's trying to call it, the Bill Snyder days, he's trying to bring that back to Kansas State. If he can make that work in 2026, get this team to 8-4, maybe even 9-3, the future looks certainly bright for what he has planned.
What I like about Kansas State and what they did in the offseason is, number one, retention. And the retention is not great, but let me unpack it a bit. K-State lost 31 guys. Now, when a new head coach comes in, you're probably going to lose around 30 guys, or likely more. Listen to this. Iowa State lost 54 during their coaching change. Oof. Colorado, no coaching change. They lost 34. UCF, no coaching change, 33. Baylor lost 33 guys. Texas Tech and Houston, BYU, the top teams in the conference, they didn't lose a lot of guys. But West Virginia, 44. Oklahoma State, 64. Somehow Kansas State at 31, that's a really low number, namely for a team that lost its head coach. It seems like at kind of a wild rate, these dudes are bought into playing for Kansas State, not just a coach.
Yeah, and only a couple of them followed Joe Klannerman to Baylor on the defensive side. So really, most of the transfer portals were some that you probably assumed were going to happen eventually, even if Chris Kleiman stuck around. The fact that you were 6-6, you need some sort of turnover, right? 6-6 isn't good enough in this world of the Big 12. So 30-something transfers in a world where you're trying to improve is probably not the craziest thing in the world. Ones that hurt, obviously, losing Tobiasu Nsami, Chidi Obiizor to Indiana. There's a reason they went to Indiana, right? The ones that just won the Natty. Austin Romaine, the Texas Tech's not going to feel great. Thankfully, Kansas State doesn't play Texas Tech unless they see him in Arlington this year. Those are the ones that really hurt. And obviously, Dylan Edwards to Kansas is going to be an interesting Sunflower showdown. There's no doubt about that. But what they did, not only did they lose certain players, some big players that went to Power 4 schools, they replaced them with Power 4 transfers as well. They got a lot from Oklahoma State, including Wendell Gregory, who is an interesting and really fun edge piece to watch. They brought in guys from Auburn. They brought in guys from Kentucky, Illinois, Mizzou, you name it. And of course, players from Texas A&M to follow Colin Klein. I really enjoy the type of player that they brought in. A lot of it's developmental pieces, which means that it's not just 1 year of eligibility. They're going to get in the Colin Klein system. They're going to get in this brand new system and hopefully build a relationship that can help Kansas State be successful for year in and year out. And I think that's huge when you're trying to battle the BYUs and crumble cookies, when you're trying to battle the Texas Tech and the Oils. You got to find a way to compete and have some sort of different type of competition level. I think Kansas State's going to focus on that relationship side, and that starts with developmental.
Yeah, I love that. Like, everybody that's listening to Locked On Big 12, Christian Rao just gave that to you for free. That was free. You didn't have to pay for that. Like, you just got some wild ball knowledge from Christian Rao of Locked On Kansas State. And yeah, if you were a West Virginia fan or a Baylor fan, a Houston fan, you're like, why should I care about Kansas State? You're getting the inside look around the conference of what a team like K-State under Colin Klein will provide to the Big 12 next year, and how they'll play against your favorite team. And look, the schedule is not incredibly easy. Washington State could be tough. Tulane could be tough, though I know they lost a lot of pieces with John Summerall leaving to go to Florida. But if you start 3-0, that's a big win. And then, Christian, Cincinnati on the road, very winnable game given what they lost. Houston, it's a home game. You probably still lose that one, but it's a home game. You're looking at mid-October at home against Kansas, very winnable, where K-State's only a couple wins away from bowl eligibility. The schedule opens up pretty favorably.
Yeah, 7 home games is huge. And I think there's a really strong chance and a really there's a possibility, again, optimistic view again, that Colin Klein could own the Big 12 in year 1 if he does it at home. I mean, he could be bowl eligible just from winning at home. Do I think that happens? They got a lot of tough opponents at home. Houston being one of them. Of course, you got Arizona as well. I think both of those teams really showed this past year that they don't belong in the bottom of the Big 12, something that maybe a couple people were thinking that was the case between Houston and, of course, Brett Brennan and what Arizona brought. Right. I certainly felt that way about Arizona. I don't feel that way anymore. Yeah. I think Houston is going to be the main game. That is, when I look at this schedule, the one I look at the most is October 10th, the 5th game of the season. If you can get through your non-conference play, if you can get past your Big 12 opener, which seems to always be on the road for some reason, whether it's Dublin or an actual Big 12 location, if you can get past that, Houston, a game that in 2024, Kansas State was up 7 and they had a 7-1 record, and then the wheels fell off in 2020. Yeah. All the question marks happened about Avery Johnson. And then Houston this past year was 10-3. If they can have a huge, impressive game in the home game for Colin Klein, the home Big 12 opener for Colin Klein, I think that changes so much for not only just 2026, but the entire recruiting and transfer program, the entire relationships for Colin Klein as Kansas State's head coach.
Yeah, no doubt. Christian Ralph, Locked On Kansas State, dropping ball knowledge on Locked On Big 12 here as part of a crossover. Coming up, Jerome Tang, fired? Question mark. This is Locked On Big 12, Locked On Kansas State. Hey, yo, dog. Today's show is brought to you by Indeed. Indeed is exactly where I go this time of year. Because now, about at first of the year, almost every year, I look for a new intern for Locked On Big 12. Indeed Sponsored Jobs is the place that I go to match with quality candidates instantly. I'm hiring. I need somebody who can help. I need somebody that can jump right in immediately that has experience. And in the minute I've been talking to you, companies like yours made 27 hires on Indeed, according to Indeed data worldwide. Indeed Sponsored Jobs, $75 sponsor credit right now. Listeners to this show, $75 sponsor job credit to help you get your job in front of the most eyes possible at Indeed.com/podcast. Indeed.com/podcast. Terms and conditions apply. Hiring, do it the right way with Indeed. Today's show is also brought to you by the easiest way in the world to get tickets, Game Time. I love Game Time, man. I was going to a concert a couple weeks ago, seeing the Turnpike Troubadours, a Texas band, East Texas. Oh, they're Oklahoma band, but it was in Texas. Had this East Texas sound, Oklahoma sound. Needed cheap tickets. Billy Bob's was the venue. All in price up front on Game Time, and it was face value. Loved that. View from my seat before buying and making the decision easy for me is the easiest part of Game Time. The zone deals stand out too. You check the section, they find the seats for cheaper. Get NBA tickets, concert tickets, any of that with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Use code Locked On for $20 off your first purchase. Code Locked On for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Remember, GameTime.co, not .com. Game Time. Download that app. Do it today. Christian Ralph, Locked On Kansas State. Look, man, I like Jerome Tang. After the Baylor Bears won the Big 12 regular season in basketball, the last time they did so, my first hug was Jerome Tang. Nice guy. Went to K-State, won immediately, and now you either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become a villain. The wheels have completely fallen off on Jerome Tang. I'll put it plainly. Is it time to fire the guy?
Yes, but I don't know if you can afford to. That is in a nutshell, exactly that. Is it time to fire him? Absolutely. I mean, you can't completely shift and be seen as one of the top 3 transfer portal classes 2 years in a row with brand new different roster and then just completely miss the tournament 2 years in a row and not just miss it. You're going to miss it by a lot this year. I mean, your only win in Big 12 play is against Utah, who, as much as Utah's building and getting themselves, they were seen as the team that was most likely going to be at the bottom of the Big 12 this year. It was just expected because they were building the roster. And you just sneaked by Utah. You just did. And you just got blown out by Iowa State at home, your third biggest loss in program history at home. And Jerome Tang said, you know what? I'm not disappointed in my game. Yeah. Are you serious? How can you not be disappointed if you just lost by 30-something points at home? Your third biggest loss in program history, and you're not disappointed? I can give you 18 million reasons why the fans should be disappointed.
That's a lot of dollars. It's a lot of. It's that 18 million has to be strategic.
$18.7 million is his buyout.
That's confirmed. Oh,
if he is terminated without cause before May 1st this year, 18.7 million is his buyout. Now it goes down a little bit after May 1st, goes down to $15.75 million. But listen, is that $3 million worth it? Because that's after May 1st. What happens before May 1st, Drake? April 7th to April 28th, I believe, is when the transfer portal.
Yeah. You think that the upper levels at Kansas State, the management are like, come on, Jerome, just bet on college basketball one time. Just $10, open up FanDuel. Just let's knock it out here. Put it on Liberty, put it on Belmont. Let's go home, buddy. That's like it's not what happened with that. Coaches have been fired many times for cause, usually for much more nefarious reasons. That's probably if you're the athletic department at Kansas State, what you're secretly in the back of your mind kind of rooting for, because $18 million today, that's an entire year of revenue sharing for your athletic department, saying $3 million. It's in that same ballpark. That is crippling for most of the schools in the Big 12. That's over half of your revenue that you garner from the league's payout when it comes to TV money as well. Like, Christian, if it's not, the athletic department ponying this up themselves, are you just going to donors and saying, if you want this guy gone, you got to pay for it?
You have to. I don't think you have any other choice, because I think you either right now are dealing with the fact that you struggle next year because you have to find a way to be broke for a minute, or you struggle next year because you're stuck in a situation. I think regardless, they're financially stuck. I think regardless, you're in a bad situation as the basketball program, whether it's Jerome Tang as your head coach in 2026 and 2027, or it's somebody new. The only good side about it is that if it's somebody new, at least you can focus and change your direction elsewhere. One other thing that Jerome Tang hasn't done, with the exception of David Castillo, who kind of turned out this year as a decent basketball player, who might transfer out this past year, who knows, has not focused at all on the high school recruiting side. So once again, whether Jerome Tang is back or not next year, they're going to have to triple dip into the transfer portal for the third straight year after the Coleman Hawkins experiments failed. Although PJ Haggerty is the fourth leading scorer in college basketball, they still only have one win in the Big 12. So you can call that a failure for sure. 2 years of this being a top transfer portal team has not done anything, but they have to do it again because they didn't do any focus towards high school recruiting.
Is there any way, man, that we're talking about in 4 weeks, a great turnaround, one of the great turnarounds of college basketball, where K-State goes on a run in the Big 12 tournament, or they have a really good end of the regular season and find their way in, sneak their way into March?
Do I think the talent is there? Do I think the fit is there? I certainly do, but something's missing here. And I don't know exactly what it is, because earlier this season, this team had its ups and downs. Sure, we thought this team would struggle defensively. That was something that we walked into this season, myself, walked in, thought that they were going to struggle defensively, and they did. But there was moments in non-conference play where they were amazing in the first half of the Cal game. They almost lost that game, but they beat Cal. They were a 2-point game away, a 1-point loss away from handing Nebraska their first loss in a year and a half. Nebraska, who's sitting on the number 1 line right now in bracketology, Kansas State lost them by 1 point this year. There has been moments this year where Kansas State has shown that they can be a team that can run with the Big 12 elites. And that's saying something. This is the best college basketball conference in the country. But then there's these other moments where you just sneak by Utah, where you lose to Iowa State by 30, where you just don't show up. At halftime, you're walking to the locker room. It's just, you can tell the quit is there. I think the buy-in's gone, and I think that's an impact on culture. So do I think there's a chance? Slightly, but I'm not going to hold my breath on it.
And I know the administration has been pretty clear the money's too much. Like, everybody sit down, be quiet. Yeah, just support Jerome Tang, and sorry, our bad. So oops, we loved that first year and got a little bit too happy with Jerome Tang. If you did move on, if you did pony up the $18 million, where do you go? What do you do? I mean, is there somebody in the ether? Is there an immediate plan of, okay, let's go grab the guy who's at Miami of Ohio? Or is there a Colin Klein floating around? You think this is a dude with K-State ties that we need back in the program?
Yeah, everybody wants Brad Underwood. I don't think that's going to happen. I think everybody wants to make him say no. He's going to say no. Why would he want to come to a program that has struggled multiple times, where 3 years in a row, potentially this year might also be the case, that they dismiss a player from the basketball team? There's potential that there's somebody who's leaving Kansas State this year too. It's happened the last 2 years. If I had to say one player right now, or one coach that sticks out in my mind, it's the head coach of St. Louis. What they've done in the Atlantic 10 right now, they're ranked in the top 25. Josh Schertz has been amazing for the head coach of St. Louis. That's who I would point to, saying you make him one of your first interviews, make him show that he can do that. And of course, what he's done in the recruiting trail, obviously he's stepped up the Atlantic 10, who's one of the top mid-major conferences, I would say. What they've done has been certainly impressive. And Missouri, that pipeline is not far away from Kansas. So at a national stage, you can recruit. And then of course you can recruit locally as well. That's my first pick if I had to pick one.
Yeah. There you go. Christian, if Jerome Tang is working the sidelines at Kansas State next year, how will fans respond?
I'm assuming attendance would be low.
Right.
I guess maybe early we get a message. I have a feeling that if Jerome Tang is the head coach next year, don't expect a big superstar signing. We've got that in 2 years in a row, where he's always had to have a star, whether it's Naquan Tomlin, whether it's Coleman Hawkins, whether it's PJ Haggerty. He's always had to have that. In the last 2 years, really last three, because the Tomlin thing didn't happen with the dismissal. The last three, it didn't work out. This next year, I have a feeling that NIL budget, regardless of if they have to keep him or not, is going to be a lot lower. And it's just going to say, look, you have to just figure it out and find out how to work this. And if it doesn't work, we'll just sit at the bottom of the Big 12 like we're doing right now. It's unfortunate, but I think that's what's heading in the direction for the men's basketball team.
Tank and save for a year, man. Tank and save. That's some schools should just tank for 2 years and then have money in the pool to be great. That you can do that.
Crazy the different optimism levels we're at right now with football and basketball. It's insane.
That's nuts. Christian Rao, where can folks find more of your work on Kansas State?
Locked on Kansas State, bringing you Wildcat coverage like nobody else, as you can see right here. Everywhere you listen to your podcast, YouTube, and of course you can find it on Twitter X at Locked On K-State.
This has been and always will be Locked On. Thank you all for making it your first listen every single day. A crossover with Kansas State and Dose Grande.